All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Curt
and Brad Pinsky.
And we are here for another edition of Fire Law Roundup for May 26th of 2020.
I hope it's not May 26th.
Oh, damn. I'm sorry.
I'm trying.
I'm so worried about catching this little thing here so it doesn't give us feedback and stuff. June 26th of 2023.
And we could caption this segment like many segments. Don't do that. I mean, I'm not sure what this is. This is just a lot of things that if you do, you're going to pay money. So let's start right in Canada and then we'll jump out to another one. But we start with a pair of sexual harassment settlements. The Canadian one is extremely interesting. First of a kind ever that it happened. It is a class action.
It is a class action.
And if I remember correctly, it was probably about 6 or 7 months where the Canadian Fire Service came out and said, we have an issue. We have a toxic issue of hostility against women, et cetera. And here you go. Here you have a situation where it's a settlement, I believe. It's that each person who's a woman who's been in the fire department for the last 20 years is going to receive, depending on the varying level of what they underwent for bullying, harassment, discrimination, et cetera, between $10,000 and $250,000, presumably for their claims or would-be claims. And presumably this increases based on the length you've been in the department. So this is a big deal, but I think it's also a big deal because combined with the government's comments, really harsh comments about its own fire service saying we have a toxic environment for women. This is a, if you don't get the hint here, you're never going to get it. That's got to end. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to talk about that specifically in Canada, or we want to just jump right into New York.
One thing I would point out is we're not Canadian attorneys, so I don't know how much this translates over to the US in terms of a remedy. Because it was a settlement, it wasn't ordered by the court. And so I think their court systems are analogous to ours and their laws are certainly analogous to ours, but I don't know how class actions work in Canada. So there may be some nuances there that, while certainly relevant, and I think it's the same thing. And I know the fire brigades in the UK are dealing with the same problems. Okay, so, here in the US, we're not unique in trying to deal with these problems, but Canada, this is one, and this has been a front page headline for much of the last year in Canada, and I think there's been a lot of attention to it. I think it's unfortunate sometimes that elected officials don't take these problems more seriously and put pressure on fire chiefs and administrators to really fix this problem. But now it looks like there's enough attention on it. And, there's so many different levels here. But this was pretty clearly sexual assaults. Some of the factual allegations about sexual assaults that happened in the station, bullying, pretty outrageous kinds of stuff that was reported and apparently never dealt with. And many fire departments don't have the inside capability to do good investigations. They don't have a very good disciplinary structure. And without that, the fire chief is like, well, what do I do? You're accusing one of my best firefighters of doing something wrong. And, maybe you're not an A-team player. And so now the organization is kind of lining up behind the bully. And the chief doesn't really have the skills or the tools to really say, I don't care who you are, this is not going to be tolerated in this organization. And so again, I think there's a lot of different levels, but the settlement seems pretty, it's got the elected officials' attention, let's put it that way. And when you have their attention, then things can happen. The money's going to flow, station modifications, a lot of other things that often get neglected when we go to a more diverse workforce. And all of a sudden, well, you know what, I guess we're going to have to upgrade the stations. I guess we're going to have to do a lot. We're going to have to do officer training in this particular area. where before we couldn't afford any of those things. So,
and look, if you're a fire chief, because there's the opposite side, right? You painted the side of the fire chief who wants to do something. I'm a believer that if it's toxic in the department, it's toxic because of the fire chief, whether because of their direct involvement or their absentee involvement. And the first thing any fire chief can do, if they want help, is stand up and say, this shit ends now. And if you are a fire chief who is not doing that, or you want to allow the discrimination or the harassment or the bullying because you think, oh, it's making our male firefighters safe and our community safer by getting these weak women out, right? If that's your mentality, and I've heard people say that,
absolutely,
your time in the fire service has expired, your way of thinking is out, and you need to retire because you are antiquated. And this is where the world is. The world is where we all can, not everybody's equipped to do it, but everybody should be given the chance, the proper chance, without harassment, bullying, harmful pranks, jokes, whatever. They should be allowed to do it. If they can meet the standard, a fair standard, then they can do it. Leave them alone. But, if you're one of these people who believe women or black or gay or whatever shouldn't be in the fire service, you're a dinosaur now. Get out.
Absolutely. I don't mean to throw cover for folks like that, but I'll tell you, I've had good chiefs. I mean, folks that are right-minded and everything. They're hiring a diverse workforce, and they go to the city administration and say, okay, I've got 8 stations. I'm going to need about $800,000 to upgrade the bathroom and shower facilities. And the elected officials say, no, sorry. And then they go to the city officials and say, look, we've got a diverse workforce. We've got to do more than just a check the box training for sexual harassment. Right. And they're told, no, we want to send our officers. No, you can't have the money. But these same elected officials are the ones that are saying you've got to hire these people. You've got to hire a more diverse workforce, and they're not providing. So I guess my point with this is that the elected officials finally realize, hopefully, that it's going to cost the taxpayers money, and that the money that you invest up front in station modifications and accommodations and training, and I don't mean tactics training. I don't mean blue card or red card training. I'm talking about HR training for our officers so that they know how to deal with these problems. We're going to be so much better off, and the department is going to be so much better off. So I agree with you. The dinosaurs, their time has long since expired, but there are some good chiefs out there that are struggling with these problems, and the resources that they need to deal with it are not coming forward. The ideas, the elected officials are coming forward with these wonderful ideas, but then they're shortchanging the departments on the other end.
Yeah, and then don't doubt it. Speaking as, our past fire chief selves, darn well what's going to happen. The same elected official who refused to support you to resolve the issue, right, then turns around and blames you, fires you, criticizes you when you haven't done it. And speaking to our younger chiefs and younger leadership, this will haunt you forever. Yeah. Right. Once you are pegged as somebody who tolerates harassment, discrimination, bullying, hazing, whatever, you're done in the fire service. It is going to be on the internet. You're going to end up on our show, right? And we're going to be talking about you, and like, well, who knows? And the back end of the story that we'll never see is that fire chief went to their elected officials and said, we need to do something about it. Right. And it's not just sexual harassment, by the way, and sexual diversity, it's gender identification.
Absolutely.
We need changing our bathrooms, right? We have these states like New York, which has all these great ideas about protecting the rights of people, but we don't want to invest the money to do it. And to your point, so hopefully this will send a shockwave through Canada. But all of the next one we're going to cover now in New York, I don't think shockwaves are ever felt. I don't think in a department that shockwaves are really ever felt on something like sexual harassment and such. Mm-hmm. So go to New York, same issue. This isn't the first time there's been sexual harassment cases, but here we have in Harrison, New York, this is a smaller area. This is not a huge area of the state. It's not like you're in Manhattan or something, but they were ordered by the Department of Justice. So when the DOJ has to get involved, you are about 3 steps past anything good happening to you, right? At this point, the DOJ said, we are getting involved. That is not a good sign.
And they don't
ever.
they don't take every case. I mean,
No,
every case
no.
has to be filed. In order to file a lawsuit, a sexual harassment lawsuit, you have to file with the EEOC. At that point, the EEOC looks at it, and when it's so outrageous, they're going to refer it to the U.S. attorney and say, look, we don't want this particular employee bringing this themselves. You need to get involved. And that's what happened here.
Yeah. And so I've only once gotten a call that, hey, we just got a subpoena by the Department of Justice for our files. I'm like, oh boy, right? How did it get to this? Should always be the answer, because it doesn't just jump to that. A lot of things happened where you could have prevented it. In any event, the short news is it's a $425,000 settlement for some really bad things that didn't just involve, and we talked about this before. We've covered this on the video. But basically, this woman is being harassed. She reports it. It even gets to the police chief, and the police chief tries to bury it, right, by hiding and
then threatens her. Apparently threatens her.
Yeah, and even this comment that allegedly made, she's a temptation on the fire ground. I mean, Jesus Christ. So this was a continuing series of harassment, bullying, threatening of criminal prosecution, trying to bury it. And I got to tell you, $425 is cheap. $425,000 is cheap. Now, this will not be the end of their cost. There's always with the DOJ training, certifications that you did training at officer level, et cetera. So to your point before, to the municipality, you're going to pay now to correct a situation, or you're going to pay like 20 times more later to correct the same things. You might as well fix the problem and avoid the lawsuit. But this was a really, we've already covered all the facts in the prior one, but again, it was unthinkable what happens here when the police chief is even trying to bury it. But I think this kind of goes into your mentality that you were just talking about a couple of minutes about when the fire chief or maybe the police chief rarely is faced with some of these, and you're like, wow, I just don't believe the female. I don't, and people do lie on both sides, men, women, et cetera. So with a he said, she said, how do you know? Right. And let's say, look, I've known the fire chief for 10 years, never done anything like this. Can't imagine this would ever happen. And here you go. On the other hand, the DOJ is not a schlock investigator, right? So this stuff was verified, you can bet. And it just, wow is what I got.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that happens is a lot of a bias that kind of creeps into our decision making. And when you have somebody who's really valued in the organization that is accused, there's a tendency for the group, it's almost like group dynamics, where the group lines up behind the person who's accused and kind of against the person who is making the allegations. And that's it's group dynamics. Okay, there is that real phenomenon there. And sometimes the person who is making the allegations is not a noble person, not like a heroic kind of figure. In fact, many times they may be somebody who the organization really doesn't value. Okay, you still cannot harass that person. And if you have an allegation of harassment, it has to be investigated. You can't short circuit it by saying, oh, that was A that made the allegation against B. And yeah, we know A, we know what A is all about, so we're not going to investigate it. That is like a fatal mistake. You have to investigate it.
And you have to train regardless of the outcome, right? You have to provide some sort of training or counseling to both parties with a standard statement. Nobody retaliates. This was reported hopefully in good faith, but no retaliation. But I'll tell you, so a lot of times, and I probably investigate sexual harassment, I'm not kidding, maybe once every 2 weeks. And I constantly have the issues which is good that they're getting reported, right? Not good that they're happening, but good that at least people are coming forward with them now. But the trends I find are either, one, the facts are in dispute and the stories are so far apart. And I had 2 of those in the last maybe 2 months, right? The facts are so far apart. Or the facts are true, which I'm also finding, but for example, I just had one where somebody's saying horrible things. The chief was listening or in the area 6 feet away, claims he never heard any of it. So it's not that it wasn't being said.
Sergeant Schultz, I see nothing.
Right. And look, there are some possible reasons. We'll find out soon when we get the results. But it's not that he's disputing it happened. He's saying, I didn't hear it if it did happen, right? So sometimes there's that. And then sometimes there's, well, what you think is harassment isn't harassment. What you think, just because someone's saying work harder, that doesn't mean you're being harassed. So there's a lot of scenarios, but to the point, if you don't investigate and you don't find out what was said or wasn't said or what was done or what the defenses are, you're done. And I'm just going to repeat something that you say all the time. If people are listening to investigations and how do we do investigations and who does investigations, is you investigate without trying to get to a conclusion, right? I don't care whether I'm not going to believe you're guilty or not guilty. I'm not going to say, and if you're a person investigating and you're someone who says, I can't believe this person did it, you shouldn't be investigating, right? You should be going in there saying, I don't know what happened. Let's just put the facts on paper, see what the end result is.
Search for the truth. It's a search for the truth.
But as you always say, most times we are just chasing the conclusion that we believe you're guilty or not guilty. And the investigation takes a bias that way when you don't ask hard pressing questions because you believe or don't believe the result. So anyway, stop harassing people, everybody. Very, very simple. Okay, I love this one. We're gonna go out to Beverly Hills. Probably not cheap vehicles out there. And this is a really strange lawsuit. This is in 22. A fire truck blocks a street, I believe. It seems like it's going to be for a fire-related emergency. Somebody drives down. This is the person who's driving down, sues, but drives down. The firefighter is driving down the street. The firefighter opens a door, 250-pound door, 200-pound door, allegedly, and opens a door right into, I'm guessing, a very expensive car. And causes substantial damage to the car, and they're suing the fire department. Should be the opposite way. They're suing the fire department for, damage to the car, etc. You went into a California law, and you said there's a New York has no such law. You said Rhode Island has a similar law.
Before you say that, go ahead. I'll tell you a little story about Rhode Island, but go ahead.
Okay. So, and look, there are laws: failure to obey a traffic control device, failure to yield the right of way. This is how New York would deal with it. You didn't yield to the vehicle. You went right next to it. Stay behind laws, don't follow laws, those types of things. Move over lane laws, which we have and many states have now. But nonetheless, here it's, you can't be near a vehicle, the law says, right? An emergency vehicle blocking intersection, and they just run right down it. So jump to Rhode Island, I guess. So anyway, it's just a lawsuit, but it's a crazy lawsuit. The fire department should sue this guy, frankly. Right.
Well, most states have a law that prohibits someone from opening a door into traffic. So if you're on the curb side, you can open the door, no problem. But if you're on the street side, you've got to make sure that it's clear. Okay. So most states have that. Most states, whenever I've looked, states have had it. Can't speak for New York. I haven't searched it, but I'm assuming.
I'm looking now. I'm curious. I've never seen it.
Okay. So now, but most states that I have seen also have the other law that say that when an emergency vehicle is stopped at an incident scene, you cannot proceed on that block. You cannot drive onto that block. And then in California, and that's what ours says. And then if the block is longer than 300 feet, you can't come within 300 feet of the incident. Okay. And that's so that people can take equipment off trucks and stretch hose lines. And you can't, you don't know which side of the street it's on. If the truck is in the street, they could be parked on the opposite side or whatever. So bottom line is you can't proceed. So here we go. Chief Verone gets dispatched. I think I was out on the air. I'm pretty sure I was out on the air because I ended up first in a reported building fire, which I always try not to do as a chief because
Right.
you want to let the folks get in there and get set up first. But it ends up I'm there first, okay? And it was one of those where I'm trying to see the numbers in my advanced age. I'm trying to catch the house numbers, and I apparently went by it. Okay, so I backed up, and someone had pulled in behind me when I went by. So I didn't see him there. I had a lot of gear in the back of the SUV I was driving. So I backed into him at the scene. Okay. So do my reports and everything. It turned out to be like food on the stove, something like that. So the city attorney calls me about, I think, 3 or 4 months later and says, we've got a claim here. We're just going to pay it. I just wanted to, kind of go over some of the facts with you. And I said, why are you going to pay it? He said, well, you backed into a car. I said, yeah, I was at a fire though. And he said, well, what's that got to do with it? And I said, well, there's a law that says, you can't, a vehicle can't. He goes, there's no such law. He's telling me, right? And this is a kid, he's like 2 years out of law school, relatively new, right? And I said, what do you mean there's no law? There's a law. I'll get. I don't have the citation for you, but I'll get it. He says, well, we'll get it for me. And I said, so it took me 15 minutes. So get the law, shoot it down to me. He goes, holy cow, I had no idea that was there. Yeah, we're not going to pay this. Right. So again, and come to find out, and that was the first incident that came to mind. And I've used that in other cases as well. But the bottom line is that, laws like that exist in California as well. And I think if you dig in, they're not usually easy to find.
Right. New York, I just looked, has a normal law says don't open your vehicle in traffic unless it's safe to do so. There's no emergency vehicle exception, but I could come up with other laws that would kind of meld into that. Yeah.
Well, look around, because I was surprised that California, I knew we had it. And then when I looked, California, but it wasn't easy to find. These laws are not intuitive. They're not all under an emergency vehicle code. They're in different parts of the traffic regulations. So, but bottom line is that was a little bit of factoids for our audience. So.
But everybody should look. I mean, you open a door to step into traffic, we should be looking anyway.
Well, right? It could have been another company coming in. You want to look, and from the description, it says opened a 200-pound truck door, but it doesn't say whether or not it's like the jump seat door or whether it was a compartment door.
I'm assuming it's the passenger door.
I made that assumption as well, but again, it just says fire truck door. So we have a boatload of doors on our trucks. So
yes, we do. Okay, so we covered this one before. FDNY firefighter is indicted for credit card theft. I don't know if this was the same one we covered.
It's not. That was my point. No, this was the one we covered like 3 weeks ago, was in St. Louis.
Yeah, but same thing.
I found another one. We can't cover all of them, but there was another one.
Stop stealing.
The facts sound familiar. It's like we just talked about this. It was St. Louis.
So a firefighter, goes to response, takes a guy's wallet, and starts charging it the next day. Don't do that. You're going to go to jail. There's no way you're not getting caught at some point. Just don't. But he's charged with grand larceny in the 4th degree, attempted identity theft in the 2nd degree, identity theft in the 3rd degree, criminal impersonation, official misconduct. I mean, holy cow. Just don't.
You wonder if maybe our standards are coming down a little bit, or whether this stuff has been going on all along. Who knows? But, if we've got folks, we go into people's homes where, the people may have passed away. We have so much access to people's property that we can't afford to have people that have a proclivity to engage in this kind of behavior.
And look, for everybody, you should be running background checks. In New York, it's very difficult because our Division of Criminal Justice Services has not authorized full background checks with fingerprinting. And so you can look at other states. We haven't authorized that, which I listen to people like Gordon Graham, and he talks about, your next terrorist is coming from inside the firehouse. And yet in many states, I don't know what it's like in Rhode Island or anywhere else, but we can't do full criminal background checks.
It's very progressive. And I think the folks, and it's well-intentioned. This is not about intent. Okay. It's about understanding what a firefighter does, where we end up at 2 o'clock in the morning, or more particularly 5 o'clock in the morning. We used to call it DOA hour. And you're in somebody's apartment and they're dead, and you're there waiting for the cops. And, if you were the type of person that is willing to steal, you just struck pay dirt. And
oh my God, right.
We can't, there's a lot of things that we can tolerate in the fire service, but thieves is not one of them. We cannot have thieves. There's too much opportunity. And I think the progressive have their agenda. I understand the agenda. I agree with parts of the agenda, but when it comes to criminal backgrounds, we have to be careful about who we put in this position. And this also goes for officers supervising firefighters as well. But the fact that these things are happening is concerning.
And it's interesting, there's some states for example, I think I was just working with a department in Nevada, and Nevada has a very strict law about criminal background and history for EMTs, but not for firefighters. They've got this great scheme that does background checks, and you have to have a certain license and all this great stuff for EMTs. Yet firefighters first of all, firefighters could be EMTs. Maybe that solves part of it. But as you said, we're in homes. The people are on the front lawn are not home at all. And we're walking around. They're not going to discover their stuff's missing maybe forever. And we're everywhere in the house. Oh, I'll go left to the bedroom. You go right, search there. I mean, we have such an opportunity for theft. So my hopes, and every couple of years, maybe this will renew my attempt in New York. Every couple of years, I try to get to legislatures. Will you please pass a law allowing us to do a federal full background check, fingerprints and everything? I had one department, I'll tell you, who really wanted to do it. They couldn't figure out how to get background checks. And I said, easy, mandate everyone has to apply for a gun permit.
I like it.
That's what we did.
I like it.
You must apply for a gun permit whether you want one or not. So then we had the full background check.
Then we can do a full, because we don't like people who have guns. So
or don't have guns, either way. But in any event, look, and there's an 8-factor federal test, right, that everyone should know, where they have to look at the crime and is the crime compatible with the fire and EMS service, and how long ago was it? And the one thing I always tell my clients is, listen, if you've got a petty larceny, I don't care if you stole a pack of gum and it's within the last 5 years, right? Even if you're totally clear with everything else, that's incompatible. That person cannot come into the fire service yet. But how do we know? We have no way to do it. So I doubt there's any senators or assemblymen listening, but if you are, change the damn law. We need this. And it is a terrorism issue at some point. Oh, okay. Last one. This is happening every so often too. Now we're going down to South Carolina. It's a fire chief and his son are now being sued by the parents of 2 teenagers. And boy, this must be like the last month of headlines with everywhere, right? Because he's saying they ended up in their driveway, or they turned around in their driveway. So they run out after them with a gun under the guise that, well, we think they were people who've been breaking in or committing crimes. This is, I can't say anything the world's not saying at this part, right? You and I are, as Second Amendment advocates, but Jesus Christ, that what's happening with these gun shootings by neighbors and, these random acts of violence are just insane to me. In any event, look, it goes to my point. Why did this make the headlines? Because it's a fire chief and his son.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the fact that we've got, you think about it, apparently he got on the radio, his fire radio, I'm assuming, and talked to the Anderson County Dispatch Center. The kids apparently called 911. They're talking to a different. And so now I don't know how they coordinated, if they go over inner city or whatever, but you would think that there would be a way, or you would hope that there'd be a way. But I mean, this could have been ripe for the, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Oconee County sheriffs not to be aware that he's a fire chief, and that, and this could turn out to be very, if they think that they have teens being pursued by somebody with a gun, and oh man, it could be very bad.
If you're a fire chief, don't pursue anybody ever. There's just no reason for it. And it happens a lot. I did it once because the car was on fire. And they were driving down and back.
Trying to use your lights to get them to pull over. Because
I did. And
I did it once because there was a drunk driver. The guy was bombed out of his mind. And we're just trying to get him to pull over, just to get him to stay. And, but that was, that was a trip.
It's a question that, look, it's a great topic for discussion later, whether a fire chief has the power to pull someone over, but not likely. Not likely. Not for a routine traffic stop, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No.
So that's what we got. Interesting week.
All right. Yeah, it was. And again, just sort of a breaking news, and I'm sure we'll talk about it next week, but I understand there was an Illinois firefighter who's just been charged criminally with a homicide. I think it was reckless homicide for an accident. I believe my understanding of it was at an intersection, and he ran a red light and, struck another vehicle, killing a woman. And he's now facing, I don't think it's manslaughter, but it's some sort of reckless homicide based offense. We'll know more about it next week, but
it's getting more and more common, right?
Running red lights.
I think. And
I'm sorry.
This is getting more common. Was it the Kentucky one we had? And
I probably have 40 of them now in the database. But I know sometimes folks, I recently had a conversation with somebody about it, but folks are worried about, am I going to be held liable if I run a red light and get in an accident? Well, don't worry about liability. You better worry about manslaughter. Yeah. If you run a red light and somebody dies, you better be worried about going to jail, not just about, losing your house and losing your bank accounts and everything else, that you might end up in jail for it. So, use your damn head.
Because your union and your government are not coming to defend you, as we've seen.
No. So, all right. Well, that'll do it for another edition of Fire Law Roundup.